line all the way across. I will actually make this a little bit darker. Now this is not the horizon line. This is just where the top of our square is going to be. Now you do want to more or less keep your square centered. So I'll help you guys figure this out really quick. Yeah, that'll work. Okay. So about 8 inches from the side of your paper. 8 inches from the side of your paper. Hold on. 8 inches from the side of your paper, make a mark. Okay? Make a mark. This is 8 inches from the side of your paper. And you can just make a line. Now, how long of a line? Honestly, it's up to you. It doesn't have to be terribly long. And I need to back up a little bit. Okay, there we go. Okay, Christian, you had a question? Big sheet of paper. Okay, remember folks, we're using a big sheet of paper. If you have your tracing paper out, put it away. We're not going to use it. We're probably not going to be using it today. So go ahead and put it away. All right, so we have this long line here, another long line here. Hopefully you guys can see it. I'm keeping my lines a little bit lighter, but I will make it a little bit darker. Now, from this, measure 7.5 inches. And you can do it with this. You can do it with your ruler. Measure 7.5 inches from this corner along this line. And here's 7.5 inches right there. Now, it is important to be precise. We are making a big grid. So, or we're making a significant grid. So this distance from here to here is 7.5 inches. And with that, we're going to make our square. So here's my triangle. Now I'm keeping my line very light because I just need to know that there is a 45-degree angle here. So I can make a mark here at the bottom, and that's all. That's all that is for. This line should not be dark. This line should not be dark. We're not using this for any other purpose but creating a square. So this line is 6 inches down from the top of our large paper, and then 8 inches from the side. We're going to drop a vertical line straight down. It doesn't matter how long the line is. And then measure 7.5 inches here. We're just creating a square. There's no magic to this, except the magic that happens on our paper. And then create the square. You guys know how to create squares? We're only measuring once. We're only measuring once for this square. And with this, if you want to make this darker, you can. I'm going to make it darker so you guys can see it. So this is a 7.5 inch square. Now this will soon represent a 10-foot square or a 10-foot room, but we have to use inches to get there. All right, so
So it was 6 inches from the paper, then 8 inches on the sides, and 7.5 inches across, right?
exactly. Okay, so just to let you know, this is the very first project, or this is the very first drawing that I did in my perspective class. Day one. Day one. When you transfer to a fine art school and in illustration, and you take a perspective class, you will most likely do a drawing like this on day one. All right, so the reason why I tell you that is when you transfer to a fine art school, it's expected that you know perspective. That way, when you take the perspective class, you guys can do these like really cool drawings and everything. So just to let you know, this is like the very first drawing that you do. Okay, so 6 inches down, 8 inches across, and then this is 7.5 inches wide. And we're not measuring this because we're not measuring this vertical, because if we simply put our 45-degree angle at 7.5 inches and draw a very light 45-degree angle to this vertical, we've created a perfect square. And now you can erase some of these guidelines. You can erase this. Well, you can certainly erase this. I don't really need this right now. Or this. The reason why I want to erase it is I don't want to confuse it with the horizon line that we haven't drawn yet. Right now this is just a square. Now why are we doing this? Why are we not using a horizon line yet? It's because we need to designate it at a certain eye level. Well, I guess we can actually designate the eye level now. Oh, actually, let's see. No, we're going to do it after. We're going to do it after. All right, so now we're going to measure. We're going to create units, 3/4 inch units on the left. I'm sorry, on the bottom of this square and along the left-hand side of the square. You could actually do it all the way around if you want, but I actually like to measure once or maybe a couple times. I like to limit how much I measure because sometimes too much measuring can mess up your drawing. So remember, you guys remember how to use 3/4 inches, right? Everybody's slightly different because some of you guys have those whacked rulers. Can I use your whacked ruler for a moment just to explain? Okay. Okay. So right there at 24, that's 3/4 of an inch. Okay, so again, don't start here and then go to 24 again because that's a full inch that you're traveling. You need to take this, you just need to move it over and move it over and move it over. Or if you have a traditional ruler like this, you can easily see where the 3/4 inch units are. You might have to count 1, 2, 3. Or you can actually just see it. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. I don't actually like using a ruler like this. I actually like using my architect square, or my architect scale rather. I do have inches here, so I can actually do the same thing. Well, I actually like using my architect scale. Okay, so remember what our scale is, right? It's 3/4 of an inch equals 1 foot. Look at my architect scale. goes from, remember, this is actually 7.5 inches wide, but because we're using 3/4 inch units, you'll notice it says 10 there. It says 10 there because it's a scale instrument. So I could do, I'm going to do this here. And when I measure it here, I'm going to make sure I put 10 here, or I put 7.5 here. And then I count 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And I just do it all the way up until I get 3/4 of an inch all the way up. Now some of you again might have to move your ruler until you get those measurements right. So again, I need to make sure I'm right on each measurement. Because I can easily mess it up. And quite often I do. So, and I did here. So again, I like to only measure once, horizontally and vertically, because then I can do this. I can match it here and line it up and make a mark up here. I could be hyper accurate and do this too. I can measure all the way around if I want to. And if you decide to do this, it's not going to be a bad thing. But you'll notice all the way around if you do this, you'll notice that it's exactly 7.5 inches on these other sides too. Now, if you find your measurements are off, you're going to have to fix your measurements. If you find that your square is off, if it's not a perfect square, then you will definitely have to fix it. But you guys already know how to draw perfect squares, so. So again, we establish where our horizon line is. We go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.5. And again, you can eyeball it. Put a line all the way through for your horizon line. Keep it perfectly centered. I know some people want it exactly centered on the, from the left and to the right. Drawings will always look better when it's off center. Now, you don't want it extremely off center. And if you do, you can run into issues later. So let's go ahead and look at our handout. Keep it off center to the left or to the right. So I'm going to put mine right here. You can put yours on the left side. That's perfectly fine. And from here, you can draw lines converging to the vanishing point. Oh, actually, we're not going to do that yet. We need to establish where our station point is. So right now, this is probably going to be the first time that you guys are actually drawing your structured approach, and you're drawing on the same sheet of paper, all right? And the reason why is we're not going to be reusing the structured approach for any other drawing. So now with this, we can drop a vertical line straight down. And I want you guys to create an extension for it. for the bottom part here. So let me tilt back a little bit so you guys can see. And don't worry, I'll readjust it after. So you're going to drop a vertical line straight down. And you can see that my distance line goes off my paper, and now I need my extension. So I'm going to get my handy sheets of paper. And I will put an extension here at the bottom. I usually put the clean part, I usually just slip it right in, just barely underneath here, and tape it. Now, when you guys look at your handout, you'll notice that on the handout, it kind of looks like this, where you have a 45-degree line that connects the station point, or actually that connects the horizon line with the distance line with this 45-degree angle, and it hits this corner. Now, if we did a drawing like this, would it actually stay within the cone of vision? Absolutely it will. Okay. But remember, we're using this as a foundation for a bigger drawing and possibly a bigger grid. So with that, you know, if we expand on this, if we, like on Thursday, if we expand on it, or even in the future, if you decide to expand a grid, it will be outside the cone of vision if you did. So that's why we're going to drop this down lower so we get a larger cone of vision. And when we expand on it, you guys aren't going to have any weird distortion on your drawing. So we're using a 12-inch distance line from the horizon line all the way down to the station point. And draw a 45-degree line all the way up to your horizon line. You might be off your paper, then again you might not. And if you're not off your paper, that's great. So this becomes your diagonal vanishing point. And of course down here is your station point. So make sure you label them. DVP and SP. Now, because you're using a 45-degree line or angle from your station point to your diagonal vanishing point, technically you don't need a 45-degree triangle to do it, because the distance from your center of vision to your diagonal vanishing point and from your center of vision to your station point, or let's say your vanishing point, are identical. If you just create the same distance, technically you don't need to have this. but it's proper to use it, so we're using it. So again, this distance is 12 inches. Our distance line is 12 inches from our vanishing point or center of vision, whatever you want to call it. They both work. They have different purposes, but they both work because they're identically in the same place. So, and for those hardcore that want to know exactly where your cone of vision is, here, and if we flip this over and do the same thing, this is with the 30-60-90. You can see how big your cone of vision is, that when you build out, when you expand this grid, you'll be in a good place. Okay, so you should have something like this. So with this, you should be able to see your 7.5 inch square, which is not yet a cube. This will soon represent a 10-foot cube. You should have your vanishing point, and of course your distance line at 12 inches, 45-degree line up all the way up to your horizon line to capture your diagonal vanishing point. And I'll put a little note here. "45 degrees all the way up." And make sure you have your measurements all the way around. And they do have to be exact. Okay, they have to be exact. Some people are running up short, and we found out that the ruler from hell kind of led them astray. So from here, let's build the cube. Draw a line converging to the vanishing point. Keep your lines light. If you notice, my 45-degree line here doesn't exist. I took out my 45-degree line that created the square because I don't need it anymore. And sometimes it could be confusing if I kept it in. And this is another reason why I don't center my vanishing point. Because if I kept my vanishing point centered, then when you draw that 45-degree line, it's going to, drawing lines converge into the vanishing point. It will kind of, can be very confusing. So notice how light my lines are. I'm not making them really dark. Now, these are construction lines that will soon be ghost lines. This is a construction line that will remain. And now we need to create a square out of this. I'm sorry, we need to create a square plane out of this bottom plane. So we can use our diagonal vanishing point for it. Remember, we're just creating a one big cube. This 7.5 inch cube is now going to be a 10-foot cube, or a 10-foot room. So, connecting my diagonal vanishing point to the right corner. Now, if your diagonal vanishing point is on the right, then obviously you draw a line to the left. And out of all honesty, this was the most confusing part for me when I was doing this assignment. So again, this line connects all the way to the diagonal vanishing point. And this creates the depth of my square plane, or ground plane. My ground plane is a perfect square. In perspective, of course. Okay, so there's my square, or there's my square plane. Now with this, I can create a cube out of it. And you guys know what a cube is. You drew a lot of them last week. So there's no difference with this one, except this one's a little bit bigger and a little bit more significant because of what it's going to do for us this week. And here is my cube. You know, there's a lot more to this than just this. There's a lot more to this cube than just this. So I am going to solidify this cube by using a darker line weight. So our goal before break is to make sure that we have a 7.5 inch cube, or I'm sorry, let's say a 7.5 inch square that we're transforming into a 10-foot cube. So you notice, because I kept my lines light, I can now make these lines darker to solidify it. I'm even going to make this back wall darker. Now, making it darker doesn't mean you go black. Once you go too dark, it's really hard to fix your drawing. So you in the end, you should have something like this. And you can certainly erase these lines if you feel like it. Now, coincidentally, and I didn't plan this at all, my vanishing point, or let's say my distance line, actually lines up with one of my measurements. That was not planned. Just before you guys ask, did I plan that? No, I didn't plan it at all. So again, make sure you have this line from corner to corner that lines up with the diagonal vanishing point. And with every one of these units, you're going to build this grid. Now we start off with the ground plane because it makes it a lot easier to accomplish. And again, make sure you're dead on. So when you start, if you have a mark way out here, that's not going to work. You have to make sure that that tick mark is right on that line and you're exactly where it needs to be. I noticed that the first line I drew is not quite where I want it to be. So I'm actually going to move it right away because I don't want to come back and have to erase more. if you have to stand up to make sure that you're drawing your lines where they need to be, then go ahead and stand up. I know some of you are having a little bit of challenges with trying to get your lines just right. So if you have to stand up, stand up. When I was in college, in my perspective class, I watched my professor do this 3 times. He did this whole demo 3 times in class. That way people got it. But back then, we didn't have marker boards, and we didn't have projectors like this where you can actually see everything on this big screen. He did it on a chalkboard with total precision. His compass was 3 feet long. It was huge. It was a big stick with an eraser on one side to keep it in place and then a piece of chalk on the other. And he would draw these big arcs. His straight edge, his T-square was 6 feet long. It was huge. It was huge. He came in with these really big rulers and all this chalk and everything, and he did this demo in chalk 3 times. So the guy had a lot of patience. And you guys actually have seen some of his work on some of the handouts that I gave you. All right, so it should look like this. Now, I know it doesn't look like a grid, but you have this 45-degree line traveling through the whole thing that you can make your grid. So that's why we keep that 45-degree line in here. Now, this is a 45-degree line in perspective. So again, you want to make sure that your lines are nice and straight. And if everything is nice and straight, when you make a grid on the ground plane, it will set you up for everything else. If this ground plane is spot on, then it will aid you for the three other planes and the 5th plane, because we are going to grid this rear wall. Okay, so welcome back, everybody. Make sure that these converging lines are erased back here. You simply don't need them. Now, even if your distance line doesn't line up with your grid, and it doesn't have to, still keep this line in here, because you might need it later on. Okay, so now I'm going to work these verticals up. I'm going to start on this side, and then I usually work from right to left naturally, so I'm going to do that here. I'm going to do both sides kind of at the same time. Now when I draw these, I want to make sure I'm dead on. I need to make sure when I draw these verticals that my straight edge is nice and straight on the left side, because I'm right-handed. That way I know that this is going to be nice and straight. So take your time with this. If this grid looks perfect, then make sure that these are perfect. So again, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. I'm going to bring my straight edge up a little bit so you guys can see it here at the bottom. And I'm going to look really close to where these lines meet this converging, where my horizontals of my grid meet this diagonal going to the vanishing point. I'm going to make sure my pencil is sharp. And if you notice, I'm keeping my pencil perpendicular to the paper. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this. I'm keeping it more or less straight up. And I missed one. Okay, so let me get jamming on this and we'll see what it looks like. Okay, so as I look at this, I'm noticing that there's too much space here. It should be probably swapped. So this should be bigger than this space, which means this line needs to move over. So let's go over here at the bottom and let's see what happened. Okay, I think this one met just fine here. It's this one here. And I'm going to zoom in really close so you guys can see. You can see that I could have moved over just a smidgen to fix that. So let's see what happens if I move over a smidgen and fix it. But now I have to erase this. So I always try to look at my lines before I go any further. So now I need to move to here. Perfect. Okay, that looks better. It's exactly where I need it to be. So you can finish this grid or you can do these verticals. It's up to you. So I actually like to stand over my grid as I draw it, and I'm trying not to get my big head in the way. In the previous videos, I didn't realize how much my head got in the way and how many gray hairs I actually had. So when I do this, I'm lining up these measurements, these units, with the vanishing point. And I'm being careful when I draw my line in case I mess up. I don't want to be too hasty with it. Alright, so I'm going to do the same thing on this left side. Okay, so that's looking good so far. haven't used this one yet, so I think I'll start using it now. The homework sheet or the assignment brief on Canvas, or actually what you have in front of you, the handout, is a brief. It doesn't give you step-by-step directions. It gives you parameters that you have to follow. There. Now, if I'm precise with all of this, that means when I draw these lines, these horizontals, they should match all the way down from side to side. So I'm going to bring this up. I'll actually do this. I'll use the bottom side so you guys can see. Spot on. So I'll do this with every one. If they don't meet at the corner exactly where it's supposed to, then I'm not going to draw the line. I'm going to reassess the lines that I drew and see if there's anything that I need to fix. Sometimes it comes down to a sharp tip. Sometimes it'll be the straight edge is actually not straight. This is the one part where students have the most challenges. Is right here when they're doing this final, the final ceiling grid or ceiling plane. They don't quite meet up on the left and on the right. And you want to make sure that they're spot on. If they are, then you're in a good place. So there have been times where I was helping a student, they couldn't figure out why this wasn't working when they were drawing their grid. Nothing was meeting where it should have been, And then I look at their drawing and they have a big old dot here that's about 3/8 of an inch wide, a big circle that they're drawing to. Instead of a minuscule point, vanishing point, they have one that's about 3/8 of an inch wide. And that was the source of their problem. So after this, I'm going to look at the rest of my drawing and see if there's, or rest of my grid, and see if there's anything that I need to erase that could pose as a problem later. Now, if you've done it right, when you line up your station point with, let's say, this corner, you'll notice that you'll have a perfect 45-degree angle in perspective that goes through from corner to corner of each diagonal square. From the bottom inside corner to the outside top corner. Same thing with this, with the diagonal vanishing point. If you've done it right, because you only need to use it once, it should line up perfect from corner to corner. Okay. Let me double check that. I think I saw a discrepancy. No, looks good. So if all of these check out, I should be able to grid this back wall with little to no problem by connecting the verticals from top to bottom and the horizontals from left to right. I knew it. I knew there was a problem. Okay, so for those people that are kind of anal like I am, and I'll show you what the problem is so you guys will know. You guys will see. Okay. See that? I knew that was going to be a problem. Because when I bring it down here, it doesn't look like it. The space between here and here looks perfectly fine. But when I try to match it up on this line, the top and bottom, it's all janky. They don't meet up. I know this bottom one, I know this bottom plane, the ground plane, is going to be perfect because that's the first one I did. So when I line this up, that's where it should be. It should be right there. So it should meet. Now if I line this up perfectly, if I line up this tick mark perfectly with the vanishing point, let's see where the lines should be. And I bet it meets up perfect. See, I knew it. It's spot on. I knew that was going to happen. All right, so what do you do? Or what should you do? Well, if you were me, you would erase this and fix it. I'm pretty anal about stuff like that, especially if there's a possibility that I might use this later on for another drawing. And because we are, I'll fix it. So it's spot on. Another one. Oh man, there is one. Darn it. you'll soon reconsider your how much you need to slow down and be a little bit more careful. The great thing about linear perspective classes is there's always a friendly rivalry. We usually have a pretty decent community in the class where everybody's kind of looking at everybody else's work, and there's always that one person in class that's doing super clean work, even cleaner than the teacher. So there'll be people in class that are inspiring you, hopefully, to do better, cleaner work. And you will definitely see that here. This is not a super frustrating drawing to do. Okay, so let's get this right. Let me see. There we go. So when it's all done, this is what it should look like. Your line weights should be appropriate. My line weights could be a little bit darker. On the structure, so the outer contours could be a little bit stronger. The inside corners could be a little bit darker. The grid itself should be a medium line weight. It shouldn't be too dark. And you're certainly not going to draw on it. I'll go around the entire drawing and look to see if there's any smudges or anywhere that I need to clean up. I'll be very, very meticulous with it. And I'll even go to the edges. And if there's any edges that need to be cleaned up, if there's any unnecessary marks, tick marks, or whatever that I have, that I can erase and adjust, I will do that.